Hello lovely people, I'm Catherine and welcome to this week's episode of A Journal for All Seasons, Journaling for Self-Care. I just wanted to give you a little heads up, I think the expression is. This week I don't want to trigger anybody, but I will be talking about a relationship breakup. I will obviously be sensitive and not go into too much gory detail or say anything super bad. But I just wanted to give you a little warning. I'm going to stitch again. I'm not going to make a pretty spread in any way, shape or form. This is very much about the process, because this whole project, Journaling for Self-Care, this year was for me my first year alone after a 20-year relationship which broke up last year. And it's for me about processing that journey basically, and I'm sure as many of you are aware that the kind of year of grace that you give yourself is not purely arbitrary. I mean, it's about giving yourself the time to process, but the other key thing is all the firsts that you have to go through. So the first of the various holidays, the first birthdays, anniversaries, all that kind of thing. Now, although you won't see this until Monday, I'm filming it on Thursday, the 22nd of May, because it's my ex's birthday today. So I've had a very rough morning. It took me a bit by surprise. I obviously knew the date was coming, but the feelings that I've had have taken me a bit by surprise. So I went back to the wonderful advice that Maria, who is in our community here, passed on last year, and I think I shared it in an episode of Park Home Life, that on those low days you go back to basics. You do one creative thing, one physical thing, and one practical thing. So I've taken Stella for a walk this morning. I do that every morning, come rain or shine, no matter how I feel, because that is for Stella a very important part of her day. So as long as I can drag myself around the park, even with my swollen toe the other day when I stubbed it on the door frame, I managed to drag myself around the park. But I do think I will cut my grass later as well, because it felt a little bit like a cheat calling that my physical thing when I do it every day anyway. I've done a load of laundry, that's my practical thing, and what I'm going to sit and do now will be my creative thing. So I hope, I really don't want to upset anybody, but at the same time I want to be honest here, as far as I can be, without getting into too much detail. I'm telling my own story. I don't want to tell or presume to tell anybody else's story. So anyway, I'm going to switch the camera around now onto my desk and show you what I'm going to be doing. Okay, so this is the spread in my journal that I'm faced with, and I'm not going to do anything to it because it's already, it's kind of okay with the brown paper and everything. And to be honest, I just don't really feel like it. So, I'm giving myself the grace not to do anything with it. Beyond, I've just gone roughly around the edges with some ink. So I'll set that to one side because I'm going to create something separately and then just stick it in. So I'm going to do some visible mending. It seemed appropriate. And the significance for me is in the cloths that I'm going to use. So I've got, well, the background piece isn't really significant. That's just a piece of cotton gauze from an old curtain, thrifted old curtain. So that's just for the background. This piece is from a shirt of mine, an old shirt of mine that I wore for many years. And then at one point it kind of went under the arms and down the sides and in places where I couldn't really mend it anymore. And it was a cream colour, and I think it was walnut and rust dyed, something like that. But the significant thing is it was a piece of my clothing. And I've got here another piece of my clothing. This was an old linen skirt of mine that I wore, well, first of all I wore it, for best, well not for best, but and then I started patching it because it wore through in places, and I wore it as a gardening skirt. And I wore it a lot when I was gardening in France in my large vegetable garden there. And then when I came here I tore it up because it was already falling to bits, so that's part of it. So two pieces of my clothing. Now I have been, the clock's going to chime a lot, possibly 12, that was bad timing. I have been through all my scraps and pieces of, well not pieces of work, I've been through my scraps, or whenever I come across a piece of clothing that belonged to my ex, I have thrown it away. And I don't like to throw cloth away because of waste and all that, you know, but I gave myself the grace to do that. But I have been through my scraps this morning, my big messy scrap basket, and I have found a piece of a shirt of his that has missed the purge. Actually, they were slightly larger, and I've torn this little bit off and thrown the rest into the bin. Because I wanted to acknowledge that whatever happens to us in life, you know, for good or for bad, parts of it stay with us. And that was 20 years of my life, and I want to take ownership of that. I don't know if that's the right expression, but acknowledge that today. I guess I can't really put it any better than that. So, but I'm going to put that on there, and then I'm going to put it between the two pieces of my clothing, which, so it's like myself, and that's inside there, invisible but there. And I'm just going to stitch this on. I think I'm just going to stitch one way and then the other, which is my go-to way of patching, you know, for practical purposes. But for me, it's because it's symbolic. I have got some lovely words to share with you at the end, and at the end of the video I'll explain to you why I've chosen those words and where they come from, because it's from a song that was written partly inspired by me, by someone who contacted me via private message on Instagram asking my, or not asking my permission, but, you know, acknowledging that I'd partly inspired this song. So I've chosen a lyric from that, and I'll give you a link to that at the end of the video. But meanwhile, I'm just going to stitch on this and chat to you for a little bit and try and lift my own spirits and try not to bring you all down. I am going to invisible baste, just because I do that. So I've just got some, you know, normal sewing cotton. I might have to put a few pins first to hold all that together. So I thought long and hard about doing this today. I thought of just, you know, doing this on my own, letting the day go by, and then doing something else for you on Monday. But I thought I decided against that because, like I said in my little introduction, I want to be honest. And when I first started this channel, I just was myself, and I just talked, and I just told stories, a lot of stories from my childhood and things like that. And you all kind of got to know me. So when I then went through this, you know, this last few months of my life, it's only been natural that you have all, those of you that have been here, you know, all this time, have shared in that, have been with me through that. So I didn't want to not do this. I hope it's okay. I really, really don't want to upset anybody, you know, by triggering your own things. What I want to do, if I have an aim with regards to you all, is give you a way maybe that you can process stuff in hopefully a helpful, healing way. Because visible mending for me is, I mean, the visible mending movement is many, many things. One of the things is the beauty of it, and, you know, the inspiration that's taken from things like Japanese borrow and, you know, all kinds of things. I remember my granny mending, and she did it as invisibly as she could. You know, she would mend a shirt by pulling a thread, if she could, from somewhere in the shirt so the thread matched exactly, and then she would do the neatest possible darn, or, you know, whatever was needed, so that her work was not visible. And that is one of the big aspects of the visible mending movement. As I'm going to get a bit, you know, feminist-ish, that a lot of that work is women's work traditionally, and women's work traditionally is invisible. You know, we shop, we bring it home, we cook, we wash up, the food's gone, we repeat. And, you know, it's a day, I'm talking about, you know, traditionally. I know we have moved on a bit. So mending was part of that, you know, mending and darning clothes was part of traditional women's work, and therefore invisible. So the visible mending movement is kind of a rebellion in a way against that. It's a statement that says, I mended this, I was here, I did work, see it, you know, see this red button on this blue shirt, or see this red patch on these blue jeans, see my big stitching, you know, on the surface of the cloth, not hidden. It's about, and I think it's that really that drew me in, alongside the aesthetic of it, which I just love because I've always loved, you know, shabby looking things. And although maybe the phrase and the movement is a relatively new one, I can remember when I was a young girl at college, sort of 16, 17, 18, then we mended our clothes with whatever scraps of cloth we could find. We were kind of nouveau hippies. I mean, it was in the early 80s, so it wasn't, you know, the 60s. I'm not old enough for that. But we did visible mending then, I think, really just partly because we liked it, we liked the look of it, and maybe partly as well because we weren't very good, so it was visible because, you know, we couldn't do invisible. I don't know. I don't really remember thinking anything other than that we liked it. So there's a lot of things in it, and I know some people don't like it and still want it to look invisible if they mend something. And there's that whole aspect of shame of poverty and not being able to afford things, you know, new clothes. I think I can only speak from my own experience growing up and, you know, living most of my life here in the UK. And I know there are still some people, I mean, a friend was telling me the other day that a member of her family didn't agree with her getting things from charity shops or thrift shops, you know, clothing to wear, because she said that that's not for people like you, or whatever that means. So there are still some people that have that feeling. But excuse me, I'm just going to put the light on. In fact, I'm going to pull the curtain back a bit and put the light on. The sun's gone behind a cloud. Plus I'd pulled the curtain across so that you didn't have the glare from the window behind me. Yes, apologies for that, should have done that sooner. Yeah, I do think that kind of shame associated with buying second-hand has moved on a bit, like I say here in my experience, and that's partly because there's more awareness of the need to recycle. So going to a charity shop is a conscious choice that you make, even if you can afford to buy new clothes. You know, so that takes some of that shame away. You're not only buying second-hand clothes because you're poor, or even because you're poor, you're doing it as a conscious choice. So yeah, so I think that whole thing has become more acceptable. And again, like I said, Japanese borrow, particularly with regards to jeans. I mend my son's jeans. I've mended the last 2 times he's come, or possibly even 3 times. I've patched his jeans. You know, they're blue jeans, and I patched them with blue bits of denim cut from old jeans. And they are borrow-esque. They're not borrow, but, you know, they're borrow-esque. Because they're blue, and I do the white or cream stitching going in either direction, and he loves that look, and his friends admire them, and, you know, nobody thinks he's well, he's not a little boy anymore, he's 23, but nobody thinks, you know, poor thing, can't afford new jeans. And I think anything that stops people buying loads of new clothes. I'm not going to get on a real big hobby horse, but, you know, especially young people who are very much targeted for fashion marketing and all that. Apparently I am getting on a hobby horse, forgive me. And I'm aware that there are people making new clothes to look old and selling those, and that really hurts my heart. But anyway, it's, you know, for me there's 2 things. One, it's obviously always personal choice. I wouldn't try and impose anything on anybody. But at the same time I would encourage people to be aware of the choices that they make. And then if you still choose to buy new clothes, at least you're aware. I'm trying to make this little piece of thread last, but it's not gonna. I'm just gonna take it through to the back and leave it hanging. It's fine. So yeah, so that's visible mending and thrifting and all that, and I know many of you are already in that mindset because you're here and you follow me, and I don't think you would if you were totally opposed to that. You might have your own ideas and feelings about cloth that you use and so on, but you're here, so yeah. Anyway, any road up, as my granny used to say. So I've got my patch. That piece of shirt is trapped in there. Can't be seen, but it's there. And that, for me, was the metaphor. And I've got 2 strands of embroidery floss that I pulled out of my orts, and I've chosen red because red, to me, is the colour of mending. It's obviously a visceral colour and all that. I'm just going to... Oh, that's not a nice needle. I'm going to get myself a nice needle. Well, it is a nice needle, but not for this job. I want my number 9, and I want the one that's slightly bent, because that's comforting to me. It's got brown in it that I used for Fred's ear last Wednesday, which was yesterday. You saw that video. Excuse me while I just thread this. It goes easy because it's a tulip. So yes, I'm just going to do my stitching back and forth. I've also got to show you at the end, I've been through, that was also hard to do, my stitch journals, because I was looking for a particular entry. I couldn't remember when the person that I referred to actually wrote that song and messaged me about it, but I did remember that I had made an entry in one of my stitch journals about it. So I had to go through my stitch journals, and obviously many of those have documented periods of my life when I've been, in my former life, and in some of them I've written journaling entries, and yeah, so that was not easy to do either. But for the most part, I'm good. I'm doing good. I'm doing okay. But this happens, doesn't it? Either you just have days when you're low, or we've talked about the moon, and we've got the project coming up that I know many of you are keen to follow along with, following one cycle of moon phases through 28 days with a little daily something. And then we have life stuff that happens, and so whatever it is, there's stuff. And my go-to when I have stuff is to stitch. So I'm stitching, and I didn't want to stitch anything in particular. Like last week I made the feather. That was much more a kind of art journal page. Pulled that a bit tight. So I thought, well, I'm just going to get some pieces of cloth and just stitch for the sake of stitching. And then I had the idea of, putting a bit of shirt in there. And it's funny because as I stitch now, I'm not there yet. I'm not stitching yet through the shirt. I can feel it. I can feel that I'm only through the 2 layers of my own clothing. I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I think I'm going to. Putting a needle through that shirt may also be cathartic in a way that maybe it shouldn't be. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh either. But I shouldn't, or should myself. I read something in Women Who Run with the Wolves. Now I'm in the shirt. I've just felt it with my needle. And there's much more resistance there because it was a very high thread count cotton shirt. I need to get myself another copy of the Women Who Run with the Wolves, because I gave my copy to Lily when she was here for a week a little while ago. I don't think she'll read it yet because she's very busy with her studies, but I asked her to just keep it with her and think of reading it when she was ready, and that might be in a few months, that might be in a few years, that might be way into the future. Because I think I've mentioned somewhere that I came across that book quite some time ago, and read it and was interested in it kind of from an almost objective, intellectual type point of view. But when I read it again recently, since living here, it was a whole different book. I mean, it was obviously the same book, but it spoke to me with a completely different voice. So anyway, I've given it to Lily and asked her to keep it with her and read it. So I need another copy. But anyway, none of that was relevant to anything in particular, only that I was talking about that book. She talks, Clarissa Pinkola Orestes, I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce the last name, talks about forgiveness. And she talked, and this really struck me, and it's one of those things you think, that's obvious. Maybe I even did kind of know that on some level, but when I read it, it really struck me as important. And she says that forgiveness is not a switch. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. She puts it obviously much more eloquently than I can. But forgiveness is not a switch, that one minute you don't forgive somebody and the next minute you do. Forgiveness is a process. And it comes to a point where you might have forgiven somebody as much as you can. You can't say, I wholly forgive them, I 100% forgive them. But, you know, you've gone along that road as far as you can. And that really helped me enormously, because you I think I was more in the mindset that either you've forgiven someone or you haven't. It's, you know, it's a switch, it's on or off. But yeah, forgiveness, like many things, according to Clarissa, and I was inclined to agree with her when I read it, is a process, is a journey, and you may never completely forgive, you may not be able to. And forgiveness is also about yourself. It's not only about the person who you're forgiving for whatever has happened. And they may never know that you forgive them, whether you forgive them or not. They may not care whether you forgive them or not. They may not acknowledge that they've hurt you. I really hope I'm not upsetting anyone. But for your own self, to forgive somebody, even partially, it's kind of, it's part of the healing process. And I don't think I'm going to say any more about that, because I'm really worried that I'm going to upset you. And I'm going to think of something else to talk to you about, I think. But I think that's enough of that deep stuff. And just stitch. I was aware I'd sort of realised the other day, I was thinking, it was something one of you said, and I can't remember what or who, my apologies. Talking of not remembering, I must say last week's poem, The Darkling Thrush by Thomas Hardy, it was actually Pauline that recommended it, not Alison. I apologise, Pauline. And now I can't remember what I was saying before then. The story, my cloth tales, my stories, you know, the name of my channel, and I didn't set up my channel thinking, I know what, I'll sit here and stitch and tell them all stories from my past or my life. Cloth Tales was the name of my Instagram account for a long time before I even had, you know, thought of a YouTube channel, because I just liked the idea of telling stories through cloth. That was literally what it referred to, and still refers to. And I suppose it, you know, partially came from my stitch journals, and partially came just from when I make a piece, I like to sort of stitch layers of meaning into it, rather than it just being a design piece, or, you know, chosen for colour or whatever. So anyway, Cloth Tales, yeah. But then I know many of you who followed along with the stitch journal last year, that was one of the things I liked. I'm just going to pause to say I'm no longer in the shirt, and the stitching is much more pleasurable. yeah, was that I sat and stitched. I showed you the weekly prompt, and I sat and stitched, and I told you stories or tales, and I just talked. And all through that year, up until July, August, when I went to stay with my friend, that was what the weekly Stitch Journal videos were. You know, it was kind of maybe 10 minutes of me explaining to you what we were going to do, and then the rest of the hour was me wittering. And I know that many of you liked that and like that, because it's, you know, because I do it myself. There are people I listen to because I like the sound of their voice, and I like listening to them, and I sit and stitch and, you know, listen to them at the same time. You don't always want music on, or to have to concentrate on a television series that, you know, or listen to an audio book or anything, or a podcast, you know. I do understand that, and thank you for it. Thank you very much for it. But then I kind of realised that whilst I was in France, the stories that I was telling you, for the most part, were about my past, and my past pre-20 years ago. So my childhood and, you know, young adulthood and so on. And now I think I mostly talk about what's happening to me now in the present. And when I realised that the other day, I thought that was very telling. From, you know, you can read all kinds of things into anything, I guess, but you know, it seems that I'm much more, at least at the moment, grounded in my present. And I don't think there's any harm in telling stories about the past when they're interesting or funny or happy or whatever. Of course not. And, you know, I'm not saying I won't do that in the future. But no, it just struck me that now I seem to talk more about, you know, what I tell you what I did last week or so, or you know, yesterday or whatever. In fact, I'm going to tell you what I did in the last few days, because I did some quite nice things. Whereas in the past I was mostly telling you about stories from my childhood. And I'm sorry if you missed the stories from my childhood. And yeah, like I said, it's not that they're never coming back. I don't know. Who knows? I sit here usually with not much plan of what I'm going to say. I'm certainly not scripted, you may have noticed. So what comes out is what comes out, and that's me. And I'm just so grateful that so many of you seem to like that and appreciate that. So grateful. You know, those words come out of my mouth so often. So grateful. I'm so thank you, and all that. But I really mean it. It's like I really want you to understand how much I mean it. Yeah. Anyway, back to this. So I'm going to tell you what I've done over the last few days, or a couple of things. Well, first of all, on Sunday I went to the woods, which you will have seen on last Friday, which is tomorrow for me. It's like time travel, you know. I always love reading books or watching films about time travel, because I find all the paradoxes fascinating, and also the language of it. You know, how do you talk about something that's in the future but it's someone's past? And if you like sci-fi time travel type things, I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. Anyway, making these videos a little bit like that when I make them not on the day or the day before, or if I make them out of excuse me, out of sequence. I'm making this today for the very specific reason that I told you. Usually I would make Monday's video, if not on a Monday morning, probably on a Sunday afternoon. Really depends how much work will be involved, because some of these videos take a full day of, you know, doing a bit, filming it, editing it, certainly with the mixed media, letting things dry and coming back and all that. So I need to make sure I've got enough time to get all that done and get it all uploaded, and then once it's uploaded you have to go into YouTube and do other things, you know, add text and description and all that. It all takes time. Often the stitching videos, the Friday videos, and the slow journaling that is on pause for now because we're doing Slowstitch on Friday for a little while, I do on the day. because I'm just going to sit and stitch for an hour and talk to you, and you know, I've got time enough. But yeah, when I do all these out of sequence things, so now I'm talking about something that I did on Sunday in a video that I'm doing on a Thursday, but you won't see it until Monday. And the thing I'm going to talk about that I did on Sunday, you will see in my tomorrow, but it will be your 3 days ago. Are you keeping up? Are you following me? So yeah, so on Sunday, two Sundays ago for you, I went for a lovely walk with Stella to a woods that I've talked about, and if you watch Park Home Life you will have seen that last Friday, and it wasn't until I sort of finished editing that video and I uploaded it that I realised that part of that video, and I don't need to worry about spoilers now because you will have seen it, was looking for Glastonbury Tor in the distance from this woodland, and I could just make it out in the distance, but it was quite hazy and it's quite far away from where I was, and you couldn't see it, well I couldn't see it on my screen when I was editing. But then the little bit at the end of the rusty horse, which I showed you, which I actually filmed in Glastonbury in the local museum there, you got a view of the Tor close up and in full Technicolor. And you know, it wasn't until I'd finished editing all the woodland walking and everything, and then I tacked that little video on the end and pressed upload, and then I saw the last sort of bit of the horse video. There's Glastonbury Tor, and yeah, I liked that. I liked that because I felt bad that you couldn't see it, but I couldn't make you see it. I have to go back another day when it's really clear, or maybe on a clear, crisp winter's day when there's no leaves on the trees, because it is a beautiful view from there. I'm back in the shirt again. Oops, what's happened now? There we go. So I did that, and that was lovely. I just enjoyed the whole experience of having that walk and you all being with me, and Stella had a lovely time. The other thing is, Stella in Friday's video was hairy, but if I showed her to you now, she's clipped, because she was clipped on Monday. You see why people, well, there's a whole profession, isn't there, of continuity in filmmaking and all that, and there's all kinds of big bloopers that have been made famously over the years in quite famous films. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Was there a sports car in a chariot race in some film or other at one point? I do remember that friends of mine in Gloucestershire, part of Pride and Prejudice was filmed on their farm. The BBC series of Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth as Mr. Darcy. And he was told, my friend's husband, who was the farmer, was told that he couldn't plant certain crops in his field because they would be anachronistic. That's not continuity, but it just reminded me of it. Because those crops wouldn't have been grown in Jane Austen's Regency time. And Lizzie Bennet and Mr. Darcy were getting together. Another very good friend of mine actually knew Colin Firth before he was famous, just name dropping. Anyway, so I went for a walk with Stella in the woods. That was Sunday, and I think it was Monday. I don't exactly remember. It was Monday. I just felt like going out. I just got a bit of a bee in my bonnet, beyond my little local walk. And I'm a member of the National Trust. I joined because the beach where I go quite often has a National Trust car park, and I only need to go there once a month, and it nearly covers my membership fee in what I'd otherwise have to pay to park. And also there are a lot of National Trust properties around here with beautiful gardens, so I knew I would get the benefit of it. So I joined the National Trust. So I thought, oh, well, that's what I could do. I'll get my National Trust handbook out and stick a pin in it basically and go somewhere, because I'm quite familiar with all the gardens around here, having lived in this area before, and So I picked Tintin Hull. Now if you see that, if you're not local and you've never heard of Tintin Hull, there's no reason why you would have. It's quite small village, and the house is quite small, and the house is not open to the public, but the garden is. And the garden was originally designed by someone called Phyllis Rice, but then in later years it was taken over by Penelope Hobhouse, who's written quite a few gardening books. And it's a beautiful garden. It's small. I mean, it's bigger than my garden, but then most people's gardens are. But for a kind of stately home type garden, it's a sort of garden you could imagine having yourself if you were a keen gardener. And it's very beautiful. And so I took my sketchbook. I just thought, I'm going to take my sketchbook, because I haven't been sketching as regularly as I would have liked to. I've been doing a lot more stitching. So I thought, I'll take my sketchbook and I'll go to Tintin Hull. And if you say it the local way, it's spelt Tintin, like the Belgian cartoon comic book character, or the dog. There's also a dog called Tintin, wasn't there? Hull, Hull, Tintin Hull. But locally they say Tintnall. And that's another thing I want to get into, actually. Maybe in a park home life. Maybe I can give you a little prompt now. There are quite a few place names in the UK that I know of that are pronounced nothing like they're written. And I would like to have a chat about those, just because because it's language and it's interesting. And I know that a lot of the cestas, like Bicester is spelt Bicester, Toaster is spelt Tocester. We do have around here Cirencester, which is pronounced Cirencester, how it's spelt. But there are many others. There's a part of Glasgow called Mulgai, which is spelt Milngavi. There's loads of them. And so we'll get into that at one point, because I think that's fun. Because I'd be very interested to hear in other countries if you have places that are pronounced nothing like they're written. That was an aside. No, I can't remember what I was saying. Oh, so I was telling you about Tintnall. So I was at Tintnall Gardens, and I had a lovely walk around, and all the plants are flowering and it's all beautiful. And then I went through the kind of, it's a vegetable garden, but I guess now you call it an ornamental kitchen garden, because it's got flowers and things in it as well. And there's a little arboretum area. It's not very big, it's just a few trees with long grass with a lot of cow parsley and paths mown through it. And it was a very quiet day, and I almost filmed it for you, but I just wanted to, be there with my own thoughts. But I will take you there another time. So I was walking in the arboretum along these mown grass paths with all the cow parsley frothing either side of me. And just in front of me, a few yards, not more, out came a fox from the undergrowth, from the cow parsley, and she just turned the opposite direction to where I was standing. I just stopped in my tracks, and she just calmly turned right and padded off down the path in front of me. And I almost couldn't believe it had happened, although I know it did. And she was so beautiful, russet red against the green. So that was a special moment. And then I went back into the garden proper, and I found a little bench next to there's a lovely big ornamental pond, a formal pond with lilies growing in it and so on. And I sat on a bench and I sketched a little portrait face just out of my head, which is what I've been doing. I guess I sat there for maybe an hour. There's still shirt there. And and then on my way out I bought a couple of little plants. They had plants that had been lifted from the garden or had seeded, and they were very cheap. I think they were £3 each. So I bought a couple. One of them was on my planting plan, so I was allowed to buy it. It was a Astrantia major. The other one was not on my planting plan, but it would have been if I had appreciated at that time how much sun I had here. And that was Sedum spectabile, also known as an ice plant. which is a plant that I've had in a lot of gardens in the past, and there was a little tiny bit, they're tiny little plants, and I do think it will do okay here because that far border there is in the sun for most of the day. Right, and this thread's going to run out. I've got one more bit left. Where did I put it? But I had another bit. Can you see it? Did I throw it back in there? Oh, isn't it irritating when you lose things and you don't know how or where? With threads, oh, there it is. They're usually stuck to my clothes. There's one more strand, so I'll just double it up and finish that off. And so I bought my couple of plants, and then I was going to get a coffee and sit there and have a coffee, but then I saw ice creams, and it was quite a warm day, and I hadn't had an ice cream yet this summer. So I treated myself to an ice cream, and then I went back towards the car park. You go through a little orchard, and there were picnic benches. So I, excuse me, I sat there on a picnic bench and ate my ice cream in the sun. And yeah, that was a lovely day, and I came home feeling really uplifted and at peace at the same time. But that was just me feeling that I needed to go out, and yeah, having that to do. So I think that National Trust membership, which I did, like I said, for kind of practical reasons, thinking, well, I know I'm going to Burton Bradstock Beach quite regularly, and if you want to park there all day, it's £6 something, I think. Sorry, croaky voice. And the membership of the National Trust is £7 something a month, so for me it was a no-brainer, as they say. But now, because I've got that resource that I can just drive, I mean, I'm lucky that I live somewhere that there's quite a few places within half an hour's drive, and I can just go and sit there rather than making a big thing of it and going for a proper visit and all that. I can just go and sit in a garden. So yeah, I really hope if you have the wherewithal to maybe do something similar, if you can't do that exact same thing, but you know, just to find these little ways of having these little moments and making it easy for yourself to have these little moments. It could be within your own home, or you know, you could have a special little seat in your own garden, maybe you already have, and just somewhere you go and sit. But I felt so privileged to be able to just go and do that, and go and sit there peacefully and have the little walk and see the fox and have the ice cream. It's just a simple little day out. I don't have any problem with being on my own. I think I was the only one there on my own. There was a family with young children, because it's obviously school time, so they weren't school-age children. And there were 2 or 3 older couples. I say older couples, they're my age. I don't mean older than me, but I mean, you know, not young couples. No, I think there was one young couple. But I don't really have that feeling, and I was sort of aware that day that I didn't have that feeling of being envious in any way, or I was quite happy to be there on my own for now at this stage in my life. I was quite happy, and seeing the positive in that I could sit and sketch without having to consider that someone else might not want to sit there for an hour, and I could walk where I wanted to walk, and yeah, it was a kind of freedom. So that's my little bit of stitching done. I'm just going to finish that off on the back and cut my thread. Put the snippies down quietly because I didn't take the thing off them with angle. And I'm going to stick this in my journal. There's 2 little things that came off some beads I was dismantling for my dreads. And then I'm going to tell you about the word. Sorry for my journal clanging. Everything clangs here. Am I in the right place? I think so. Am I? Tell me. Can you see? So I'm going to just put that on there. I'm going to use a tacky glue, I think. I'm going to be careful. I don't need it all to be stuck down. I'm not going to put it anywhere where it's thin because it might come through. I'm just going to put a tiny bit there in the middle and spread it with my finger, and now I've got a gluey finger. Just clean my finger on there. That's something to look forward to though, because when that dries, that's fun to peel off. There, that'll do, pig. I'm just doing that. Now my words, I promised I'd show you my old journal, which also clangs. The song was written by a woman called Claire Woodburn, or Claire Buttery Woodburn, and I know she was on Instagram because I'm pretty sure that's where she messaged me. And I've looked her and she's not on there anymore, and I can't find anything anywhere, but I did find the song because I found my old Facebook post about this spread in my Stitch journal. The song is on SoundCloud, and I'll put a link to SoundCloud to the song down below, but it's by Claire Buttery Woodburn and it's called All the Little. And the title thing from it, I think her working title at the time was actually Cloth Tales. But if you go to SoundCloud, you'll see that there's an image which India Flint has given her permission to be used, and it says Cloth Tales. The words Cloth Tales are on the thing. But she messaged me and said there's so much of me in it and other people that do e-code printing, natural dyeing, visible mending, all that kind of thing. And she just said that she needed to just let me know that I had partially inspired it, and she felt there was a lot of me in it, so she wasn't comfortable, you know, going ahead with it without getting in touch with me. So the whole thing was just lovely, and the song is beautiful. And this was 15th of February 2019. I did this little spread in my journal, and one of the lines in the song is she spins the wool and makes repairs, and madder dyes the linen square. So I used a square of linen dyed with madder and so on. So yeah, that's Claire Buttery Woodburn. Wonderful name as well. And it was in this my Stitch journal from 2019, which is Wonky Log Cabins. So I'll put that over there and try not to clang it. Okay, so there we go, I've stuck them down. I just used glue stick, it seems to be working. It was quite thin paper. So this is a line from the song All the Little by Claire Buttery Woodburn. Some things are new, some things are old, but mending is the way I'm told. Oh, I've just realised it says old twice. What I shall do is get that old off there. Some things are old. Those are not the words. Where's my ruler gone? Oops. Let's do it like this. I expect you're all shouting at me. Oh, there's a bit of gunky glue there. That'll be alright, pig. That's kind of appropriate that I had to mend that. Okay, some things are new, some things are old, but mending is the way I'm told. I need to put a bit of ink on there as well. I'll do that afterwards. So I hope that was okay. I won't say I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too much. My heartfelt apologies if I've upset anybody. I really hope I haven't. Thank you so much, as always, for watching and for being here. Lots of love to you all, and I look forward to you joining me next time for more journaling and cloth tales. Bye bye.